Alright, what is up guys, and welcome to yet another Zoids HMM model kit review. And so this time we have the final Liger Zero permutation I need to talk about, which of course is the Schneider armor. This is the Markings Plus version, which just recently came out a few weeks ago. And so this kit was originally released, of course, back in the day, a couple years ago, when the Liger Zero HMM first came out, along with the other armor permutations. And I've told the story a couple times here with the previous videos about how I got my HMM Liger Zero and how it was already sort of pre-built. And the Jaeger and Panzer came with it. It bought them all off of the same person. And so all that stuff was already built. And so this was the first time I actually had the experience of building anything for an HMM Liger Zero, which was pretty nice, I do have to admit. And it was somewhat time-consuming, but not nearly as bad as you would think. I tried to do this all in one big marathon where I tried to sit down and build my new 1999 NJR Tomy Saber Tiger, the Mark II cannon set for the Shield Liger, and the two Star Wars Bandai X-Wings from Episode 9 that I got. So I tried to do all of that plus this in the same day. It did not go over very well, and so I had to allocate an additional day to doing the Schneider here, which ended up working out pretty well. And this is a very nice kit as well. So we'll go ahead and get into the lore a little bit about this thing. So there's very little mentioning of the Schneider in the battle story, actually. And they pretty much only mention it as it was deployed during the Helic invasion of the Gylos Empire, and it was deployed specifically because its energy shields are capable of withstanding the charged particle beam on the Death Stinger, and so it was deployed in the battle specifically for that reason. But other than that, it doesn't really do a whole lot in terms of the battle story. It wasn't really mentioned anywhere beyond that. In terms of the anime, however, this thing is a lot more prolific and is typically the most iconic and most people's favorite of the Liger Zero cast system armor permutations. And so, whereas the Jaeger was designed to specialize in incredibly high speeds, and the Panzer was designed to compromise mobility for long-range firepower and artillery support, this was meant for close-range, pinpoint agility and combat at close range with melee weapons. And it was sort of meant as a counter to Leon's Blade Liger, which at the time was just handing everyone their ass in the tournament setting. So I think that's a weird compromise, so to speak, because they basically took everything that makes the Blade Liger good, except for the attack boosters and the other ranged weapons. So they basically just went with, okay, let's just have the things that make the Blade Liger function well and just do those things even more extreme. So it has a very strong energy shield, like I said, and it does have blades that deploy on the side that are just as powerful as the Blade Ligers, but it also has this blade array along its main, which can all sort of funnel forward to make a forward striking blade attack, which is quite cool as well. It also has a tail-mounted section of blades, which has a scout module in it, and it also allows for some additional melee damage there. There's also some stabilizers attached to the foot calls down here, and that allows for a little bit better mobility. This thing does also have boosters, just like the base model Liger Zero and the Jaeger, but they're repositioned, so to speak. Now, this thing allegedly does have better speed, slightly better speed than the base model Liger Zero. But it seems like the boosters are a little bit of a compromise because they are now positioned right here and are more forward up on the shoulders than on the back here, which is where the boosters would be on the base model or on the Jaeger. They sort of had a compromise on the space there to add the blades in, but they're still pretty nice little boosters. They get the job done, and it's nice that they didn't have to compromise on that too much. But one of the things that's interesting about the tournament setting in Zoids New Century Zero is it seems like the Blitz team was a big fan of deploying the Liger Zero to engage with the enemy on its own terms, and I think that might have been a strategic misstep, but it made for good television. So in terms of the Jaeger, they deployed something that uses incredibly high speed against the lightning spikes, whereas when you think about it, if they had deployed something like the Panzer, they may have been able to just blow the thing into a cloud of dust with the hybrid cannons. Not to mention the cannon tortoise would have been incredibly ineffectual against the Panzer and its armor, plus all the missiles that it has. And then when it comes to the Blade Liger as well, like, you're engaging the Blade Liger on its own terms when it has, of course, Leon was proud and naive enough to not take advantage of anything like the attack boosters, and the anime in general really kind of underplays how powerful the attack boosters are. Van ditching them after a single use in the Chaotic Century anime, and then Leon just straight up never using them at all in the new Century Zero anime. We don't even know if he owned a set of attack boosters for his Blade Liger. But nonetheless, it was pretty cool to see the Blitz team take everything that made the Blade Liger effective and take it to the next level, which does mean that the Schneider was able to come out on top in that fight, which of course was disappointing to me, being the huge Blade Liger fanboy that I am. But Leon also had some really different and interesting tactics with his Blade Liger that Van did not do, which may have been to his downfall, which is hard to say. He also didn't have an organoid system necessarily, although Leon is generally regarded as a very competent pilot. So the Schneider was also deployed in, I think the first deployment was when there was some kind of weird, like, tornado generating machine thing, and it was able to kind of sort of cut through that and destroy the Saber Tigers that were maintaining it. And it was also deployed against the Backdraft group and their Elephanters, which is where it actually was sort of defeated, and so the Elephanter managed to destroy one of the Schneider's blades using its laser trunk. And that kind of set things back a little bit. And I actually think the Schneider was incapacitated for the final battle against the Berserk Fury. And so the Berserk Fury, the Schneider was never deployed in the final battle against the Berserk Fury because I think it was already too damaged to do so. So the Jaeger and the Panzer were, and then the finale against the Berserk Fury was just with the base model Liger Zero. Again, yet again, the two Ultimate X Zoids engaging each other on equal terms, which I think is probably the only option they had at that point, so I'll give it to them for that. But in terms of the video games, the Schneider is in Zoids Legacy, and I can't really tell you that much about how it performs there because I haven't gotten it yet in the game. And in the Zoids Versus trilogy, the Schneider is, of course, very powerful because not only does it have blades, which are obscenely broken in the Zoids Versus games, particularly in 1 and 2, but the melee attack on the Schneider is one of the best melee attacks in the game and is incredibly hard to dodge because it closes the gap between you and your opponent so quickly when as soon as you hit that melee button, it lunges forward with the cluster of blades around its mane and becomes incredibly difficult to dodge. But again, the trade-off is it has almost zero good ranged weapons. Really, if you're talking about effective range weapons, which is one of the best things that you can use in Battle Legends or any of the Versus games, you were looking at the base model Liger Zero, which can equip a fair amount of them, plus the Panzer, which of course has the hybrid cannons, meaning that the Jaeger and the Schneider are not nearly as useful. Of course, the Schneider being marginally much more useful because it has blades, which, no matter how you slice it, are pretty overpowered. So that's pretty much it for the lore. One little side note is with the nomenclature used. So all the Liger Zero names are German. So Jaeger meaning hunter, Panzer meaning armor or tank, depending on how you derive it. And then Schneider actually means tailor or to cut. And so some people sort of derive that as it means cutter or slicer or something like that. But regardless, that's essentially what it means. So the naming convention is pretty uniform as far as that goes. So on to the model kit itself. So again, just huge kudos to whoever designed the Liger Zero HMM kits, because they designed the base model Liger Zero and all of the armor permutations to be interchangeable and compatible with each other without having to alter too many pieces. So essentially, some of the pieces of the base model Liger Zero came back on from when I did the Panzer video. So with the Jaeger and the Schneider, this piece right here with the tail that actually pegs into the tail shaft had to be reattached. So the Panzer has a completely separate tail unit that pegs in right here. and I had to go find the original piece to peg back into it to attach this piece to the Schneider here, downgrading from the Panzer to the Schneider. It does feel really full. There is a lot of armor sort of attached to it. You have the leg calls right here. The build process was pretty smooth. I had no real problems with the design sensibility or the build at all. Everything was pretty smooth. I did have to use a little bit of glue though on these two fins right up here. You'll see that one of them is not properly aligned, and I kind of want to move it a little bit to see if I can get it aligned up, but I don't want it to pop off. So these are on there's a little pin that holds them to a panel that is inserted on the inside of the face armor right here. So right back here where my finger is a panel that actually connects in there, and the surface area where that panel connects is so small that it can't properly support the weight of this entire fin up here when it's pegged in on the side of that panel. And so I had to glue that in there, and it was one of the only times I've had to use glue in a recent HMM build. Everything is typically designed very well to where that's just not the case. But yeah, everything looks really good. The Schneider armor really does fill it out quite nice. And one thing I did not use as well is back here on this knee armor section right here on this leg call, there's a fin on each side that comes up this way just a little bit more, and those pieces absolutely refuse to stay in, so I decided to just say screw it, and on all four sides on both legs, I decided to just opt out and not even use that piece altogether, but they're still in the box there. They just refused to cooperate with me, even though they were cut cleanly. You know, I used good clippers with this thing. It's not like I left a bunch of nubs or cut things out incorrectly, you know, damage any pieces. And it is designed fairly well. This is, of course, an authentic HMM that's been retooled slightly for the Markings Plus version. The Markings Plus essentially just has new decal sheets and stuff like that the original version did not have, and it was nice to be able to actually build this with my own two hands and be able to trust the quality of the build as opposed to just trusting somebody else with it. So all the articulation is still there from the base model, and then these little fins on the side of each of the shoulder pads here do sort of move a little bit, not too much in the way of articulation for them. There is a fin that or flap that opens and closes on each booster to sort of imply when the boosters are engaged. The blades, the arm that the blades attach to pegs into the same section that the stabilizers on the base model Liger Zero do, little missile pod things on the Panzer, etc. So that was definitely a nice little design decision on this little area down here. So that white part extends out a little bit, so it runs across the bottom of the Liger Zero's abdomen, and then it extends out on both sides, and then it has a peg on each side for each of the interchangeable weapons to go into. And so it sort of makes the blade set up similar to what the Blade Liger has, very natural. One thing I think was a really cool decision for the HMM Schneider is that the point of articulation for the blade to swing out is all the way down here at this hinge, as you can see. But what's funny is when you get it all the way out to the deployed position, there's another hinge further up where the blade can swing in like so, which is really cool. That's something that they have sort of built in as an intentional design decision because they knew that the Schneider does that in the anime, and that was sort of, again, bit engaging Leon on his own terms because Leon's Blade Liger would do that, but the Blade Liger sort of does that accidentally as opposed to it being an intentional design decision. We're going to see if we can get the blades to face forward here without messing them up. I questioned myself several times as to whether or not these bottom blades here were put on correctly, and I can definitely safely say they were. I followed the instructions accurately, and yet we still have this sort of weird array here. Also have to be careful with the head because that top blade there wants to actually pop, close his jaw, wants to pop out when you swing it forward. So it's supposed to go roughly, yeah, it's supposed to go down like that, which I think that was a little bit too far down. They're supposed to meet in the middle as sort of a cluster of blades like that, so maybe that needs to come up just a little bit more. Yeah, that looks a little bit closer to how it does in the anime. So they all sort of face forward, and that just makes for an incredibly powerful weapon with a lot of reach, and it just gives it a little bit more coverage than what the Blade Liger does, which is pretty cool. I'm actually going to leave those facing forward for a little bit and sort of put this blade back up here. Man, that is so cool how how those articulate, and I don't feel like anything's going to pop off or be damaged or anything like that. So let's just go ahead and do a side-by-side comparison with the most apt comparison I can possibly make, which is with the HMM of Leon's Blade Liger. And the Blade Liger is a little bit bulkier and a little bit taller, but for the most part, their proportions are very, very similar. So, man, talk about an iconic fight in the anime there. And one thing that's cool as well about, if you were to buy the complete HMM Schneider kit, which does exist, of course, this is just the cast system, the armor separate. You can buy that, or you can buy the complete thing, which comes with the base Liger Zero body plus the armor in the same kit. And the original artwork for the first printing of that Schneider had the Schneider fighting the Leon Blade Liger. And then the newer iterations of the Schneider, the second printing, and then this newest printing, the Markings Plus version, changed it to where it's fighting a red horn, which is interesting. And I wonder if that's because they didn't have updated artwork of the renewal version of the Leon Blade Liger. But it's really interesting why they made that decision. I'm not sure why they did that. They also did that with the base model Liger Zero, whereas the one that I have, the original printing, has it fighting yellow saber tigers per the first episode of the anime, whereas the later iterations of like the Markings Plus version of the base model Liger Zero have it fighting red saber tigers a la the Battle Story and the Godless Empire, which is super interesting. You can see all of that if you check out my video on the Zoids HMM art book, or if you just compare some box art yourself. So, but yeah, I think that about does it for this. So I'm super happy with this. I'm still building the Great Saber. That's probably the next one. And then I have I'm finally going to do the video on the Gojulus, specifically the Zoidzilla version from the original European release that I got off of a collector in the UK a couple months ago. I've been sitting on it, very anxious to do that video, so that's definitely the next one on the line. So thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.